Well, good morning. I have to confess that this is the first morning that I've got here before the beginning. I'm sure this is true for some of you too. This title, which will shortly appear on the screen, I hope, talks about a number of different concepts. One of them is, I plan to talk about humanity, and I plan to talk about humanity in relation to social work theory and practice. And I just did wonder, I looked around the room earlier this week, and I look now, I don't actually see any aliens. So I think we're probably all human. If you're not, I suggest you should leave the room. And I look back over my career in social work, and I've worked with a number of people in various situations. I've worked as someone who does official social work in local government, and I've worked in community work and with advocacy organizations. And I've never actually met anyone there who was an alien either. I think everyone I've worked with has been a human being. So my starting point is that we are all human beings, and the people that we work with are all human beings. So the way in which we do our work has to relate to our shared humanity. And then you see the title has something about brothers and sisters. Well, I have the misfortune of never having had a brother or a sister. At least my father never admitted to it. So last week it so happened that we had our annual family holiday in which our children and all their children come together in a sort of glorified holiday camp somewhere in England, and it rained, as it does in England. So thinking that I was giving this talk this week, I looked at the brothers and sisters there, and the little ones. I noticed there was a great struggle for dominance. Eleanor, age 6, would take Andrew's toys, age 2, but Andrew has his way of getting back even at 6-year-olds and certainly at adults. So I detected a struggle for dominance and a lot of experience of conflict and difficulty. And yet, I noticed among their parents, my children, our children, I noticed that whenever there was anything wrong, whenever anything is difficult, whether there's any problem at all, they're there for each other. They have huge rows. They don't agree with each other. In some cases, they don't even like each other. And yet, they are there for each other. And that is the kind of human relationship that I would like to see in all global relationships. We can't like each other. We can't always agree with each other. But we do need to be there for each other. And to me, that is what the job of social work is about. Being there with and for people who maybe we don't like, and we don't especially enjoy being with, but it's our job to be with them like brothers and sisters are. So I would like to persuade you in what I'm going to say today that social work is something which is human. It's about human relationships. Even if it's on the broad scale, even if it's advocacy, and even if it's working with communities and groups, and what we need to try to aim towards is being brothers and sisters with each other. So I have an argument, and there are basically 3 points that I want to make today. I think there is a distinctive aim in social work, and it is that we are trying to help people achieve social solidarity, that we're brothers and sisters. In order to do that, we have to respond positively to the differences between us, the difference between men and women, the differences between different people of different ethnicity, people with disabilities and people with other disabilities. We all have some disabilities. And so therefore, we have to translate between the different cultures that we are involved with. And it's my task to talk about social work practice and theory. I want to argue that social work is beginning to develop some shared human principles of practice which will help us with this aim of social solidarity. Well, we've been hearing this week, and it's been an issue which is in all of our minds, at least here in Europe, that some sort of major change is taking place in the global economic system. In my lifetime, this happened once before in the 1970s and 80s, and I think it's happening again now. And our experience, I think, when we have these economic changes, is that it very often takes 5, 10 years or more whilst the system makes its changes in politics and economics. So I think we can't expect a sudden resolution to those of us in Europe who feel that things are pretty tough at the moment. I think we've got to expect that it's going to be very complex to work towards a global economic system that works for all of our countries. But we are aware, and we've been talking about it this week, that many countries are in the process of changing, developing economically, and will be contributing to the global economy in ways which in the past they haven't. And that will make the global economic system different in ways that we can't understand yet. But for one of the things which has been characteristic of the trend that we've been having is this kind of free-for-all neoliberal capitalism, which its competition is red in tooth and claw, vicious and unpleasant in many aspects. It has achieved some things, but it hasn't seemed to me, you may have your views, it hasn't seemed to me that the economic system that we've been living with in the last 2 or 3 decades has been creating good human relationships. So our human relationships need to be in a different place than the current economic system. We need to question it. And of course, since social work is concerned with social solidarity in those human relationships, we need, and people have been arguing this all week, for a new strategy for social well-being and to make a case for social work in whatever new economic order begins to emerge. So we need to think about what kinds of approaches to social work we need to have in order to contribute some humanity to the new economic order, alongside other people who will be contributing humanity in other ways. And so my response to this is I would like to think of social work as a human endeavor and to think about what it means to be human in a world which sometimes is dehumanizing and anti-human. And to do this, I like to think about what I call a humanistic practice. And I think practice of this kind, which historically has always been something that social work has tried to attain, practice of this kind comes from three principal sources. Firstly, it comes from a humanistic philosophy. And I think it does so because social work has always seen itself as a science of working with human beings. And that science has always valued the capacity of human minds, of human reason, and of our creativity to overcome the difficulties in our human and social relationships. And to target sustainable human development, we need to focus on being human because that is what will sustain us. And being human, therefore, must become a crucial part of our new economic order. So, what humanistic theory do I use? Well, I think there are three elements that are important in social work. Firstly, humanist philosophy, and some people have recently wanted to argue that humanist philosophies are secular in character, but I don't think they always are. And what they all do is they emphasize the capacity of human beings to build knowledge and skills to enable them to manage their environment and themselves. And themselves. We have to learn how to manage ourselves in relation to our environment, and we can do it through our skill, knowledge, and creativity. Second, social workers often use the humanistic psychologies and psychotherapies. And an important distinctive characteristic of these psychologies is that they say, if you want to understand human beings, you can't do that through some external observation, and you can't take apart their minds inside themselves to find out how they're ticking. All you can do is to compare them with yourself as a human being. And if you're going to compare other people with yourself, you better work pretty hard at developing yourself as a human being, because you're going to need to understand a very wide range of what it means to be human. So, in order to develop humanity in our work, we need to develop and experience relationships and other people so that we can develop ourselves and so that we can be engaged in developing them. And thirdly, I think a crucial development in our thinking in the last 20 years or so has been human rights thinking. And we often refer to the great statements, the European Charter or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But what these declarations, which are human rights talk, they're human rights statements, do is that they suggest that it is part of the nature of us as human beings that integral to our being are some features which are, in a sense, freedoms. And one of the important aspects of the Universal Declaration, which people haven't mentioned this week quite so much. A lot of it emphasizes one's legal rights and so on. I understand that. But one of the important rights contained in the Universal Declaration is the right to develop ourselves as people and as human beings. Personal development as part of being a human. Now, unless human beings are developing all the time, making progress towards something, as part of communities, as part of groups, as part of nations, as part of ethnic groups, we as humans collectively are not going to develop. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working in a hospice in South London, and you see the logo on the far side there, St. Christopher's. Working at St. Christopher's has taught me a number of things about our shared humanity, because I have learned that if you are going to be a human being for the whole of your life, that means you have to be creative and developing as a human being right up until the moment that you die. And I find it very humbling that people who know that in a few weeks' time they are going to die still want to develop in their relationships and in their humanity. So I'd like to introduce you to one of the people that we are working with at the moment. She shares a lot with me. And the reason why she shares a lot with me is that at the time I was being born and growing up as a child in a little patch of South London, she was traveling from the Caribbean to be someone who came into my community. But I never met her. I didn't meet her until she came into our hospice. We had a completely different life. I had a relatively easy glide through the British education system to university and a professional job. She struggled against prejudice and discrimination as a black woman in a cold climate. And it was a cold climate not only because of the weather, but because of the inequality in our social relations with black peoples. Now she has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. By the time you have returned from your holidays this summer, she expects to have died. And here she is interviewed by the BBC about how she feels about that. I hope this is going to work.
Can I just ask you, sort of take you back a little bit and ask you what it was like when you were initially diagnosed?
I wasn't frightened. I wasn't scared. Because of my nursing experience, I had suspected that there was something wrong. So when the diagnosis was made, it was a confirmation of what I thought was going on inside me.
In terms of the time left, though, were you aware of how much life you would have?
Yes, I felt that life for me was limited. And that brought into context the things that I would have liked to have done and had not achieved. And the very real possibility that some of those things would never be achieved.
How did you deal with that?
There was a little bit of anger, little bit of frustration. And I felt that in some respects I'd let myself down. But then I worked through that because I prayed about it. And I spoke with not a lot of people, but people with whom I felt comfortable to divulge my real self. And I came to terms with that.
How did you come to terms with it? What were the sorts of things that were going through your mind?
The sort of things that were going through my mind was, what would I be leaving for my children? Did I set a good example as a mother? I knew that in the material sense, I wouldn't be leaving them anything because I haven't got any money, property, or anything like that. But the things that are really valuable, good standards, morals, did I manage to do all that, to leave them good grounds to work on?
And did that stop the anger from flaring up? I mean, did that sort of resolve the anger?
In some respects, yes, because then I realized that what I'd done, without wishing to sound arrogant, I did them well. And I spoke to people like Andrew, the minister here at St. Christopher's, and he helped me to come to terms with not being too judgmental of myself, but just accepting what I'd done and to use the time that I've got now profitably.
Now, our theme is freedom. Did you find that working through it gave you a sort of freedom?
Yes, it did. It gave me freedom to be the real me.
Can I just ask you to sort of take you back a little bit and ask you what it was like when you were initially diagnosed?
I wasn't frightened. I wasn't scared. Because of my nursing experience, I had suspected that there was something wrong. So when the diagnosis was made, it was a confirmation of what I thought was going on inside me.
In terms of the time left, though, were you aware of how much life you would have?
Yes, I felt that life for me was limited.
Cherry talks there about something that is going to happen to us all. We are all going to die. We share that. We are all going to be bereaved. Members of our families are dying, will die during our lifetime, and we will have to deal with that. She talks about being a good parent. She talks about anger, about emotion. We all share all that. We share so many things. We can be, through that sharing, brothers and sisters. But it's not enough, in my view, to just know that we share these things, because in the same way that I share the same area that we lived in together in South London, because there are also these incredible differences between us and our opportunities. So we have to find a way of using the things that we share to learn about our differences. And to do this, I think we have to do all sorts of things with the people that we work with. And I'm just going to show you a few pictures of the work of St. Christopher's in people's homes, in our own centre, in various ways with the involvements of people in our community and trying to support people. And you notice the dog there. When I said the people that we always work with are human, I've forgotten that many of my clients have had to also deal with their pets. I remember the young man who lost his pet snake in my car. I didn't cope with that very well. But we can share across all sorts of boundaries, between old and young. St. Christopher's had a school project in which we try to encourage local young people to learn about what it means to be dying and to die. And our patients, some of whom you see there with some of the school children, really appreciate the opportunity of cutting across that old, young, dying, not dying barrier. We use music and the arts, and we use physical fitness to think about our life experience. So when I say that, and the website there, you can see a lot more about it if you're interested to do so. When I think about social work's distinctive aim then, it is in some way to share that kind of humanity. And I argue that sharing that humanity is not enough. Commitment to rights and social justice is not enough. Because if we're going to achieve social solidarity, that's our special thing. economics is about an efficient system. Psychology is about people's personal efficacy. Social work and its social science knowledge base is about achieving that social solidarity. If we're going to achieve that through interpersonal relations and injustice between groups, we have to understand and work with our differences. We have to be authentic in appreciating people's differences and not to speak only in our own culture. It's rather like language. I'm speaking to you in English. There are sign language interpreters. There are other interpreters. We appreciate that. But to help them, we have to speak in a way which enables them to translate effectively. And the Norwegian social worker Gerd Arge Askeland talks about cultural translation between a dominant culture, the fit and able and the disabled, a dominant ethnic culture, and minority cultures between men and women, for example. And making our ideas and thoughts available in a way that can be adapted, and allowing them to be changed back into a form that we can all accept. And this requires skills from all of us. If we are from the dominant culture, if we're from the English-speaking, the rich culture, we have to present our ideas and our thoughts and our learning in so that it's accessible to other cultures. And we have to be able to receive those ideas and incorporate them back into our culture. This means that we have to struggle gladly to take part in other cultures. Do you present your practice in ways that other people can gain access to? Do you see people responding to you, which means that you have to change your ideas? Do you gladly encompass people's changed ideas? Unless our culture's practice accepts other cultures' ideas and needs into their hearts, you cannot be a global social work sister and brother. And Sven has mentioned that I every so often look at social work theories. I've been doing it for the last quarter century. And when I started doing it for the first time in the 1980s, I found that social workers were at war about their theories and their ideas. But recently, I've come across the reality that we're getting to the point where we have shared principles of how we do social work, which increasingly cut across the divisions of social work theories and ideas. And those, I call them the 5 shared principles of social work in my new edition of Modern Social Work Theory, and this is a table from that book. Comes out next year. And I want just to finish by talking about some of those because they're ideas which have been here this week. The first principle is one of alliance. We start in social work with talking about relationships. But increasingly, we need to think about, and we do think about, alliance. Alliance with groups of our service users, alliance with professional colleagues, alliance with organizations in our community, getting people's informed consent, therapeutic alliance, and from feminist and critical theory, dialogues on grounds of equality. Increasingly, we're talking about positive aims, which are clearly specified. How can you ally with somebody if they don't understand what you're doing? How can you talk about people in a positive way, join with them in a positive way, if your social work method tells you to spend all your time specifying their problems? We shouldn't be specifying people's problems. We should be trying to specify the positives that they're trying to achieve. How can we ally with people unless we can say what it is we're doing? We can specify the sequences of what we're involved in. And much of our theory, from both the psychotherapeutic kind and the critical and community-oriented kind, is talking about critical thinking, about disruption. We must disrupt patterns of behavior with drug abusers, for example, which are damaging to them, in the same way that we must disrupt current social assumptions. No longer should we accept the taken for granted, either in people's behaviors or in their assumptions and their speaking. And the idea that we should respond to people's human rights, to respect them, to treat them with equality, that is the only way in which we can create sustainable human relations with our human environment. So my conclusion is that if we see the main objective of social work as achieving solidarity through equality and justice for all human beings within our societies, we must authentically offer our practice and ideas for translation across the boundaries, cultural translation, and to make authentic in our culture the new ideas which return to us from other cultures. And we're developing, in social work, 21st century principles for a global practice to go alongside our global standards for social work courses. Alliance to achieve positive aims through accountable action sequences and critically disrupting the taken for granted. And the result of that is that we will be able to achieve sustainable relationships of human rights, cultural respect, equality. And if we achieve that, we will have sustainable relations between us as human beings in our societies and our natural environment. You can contact me through these sources. Thank you very much.